a $20 million heritage mansion nestled in Toronto's aristocratic Rosedale. A twin wine cellar housing over 7,500 bottles of rare vintages, alongside a baseball collection signed by Babe Ruth, JFK, and Jackie Robinson. All belong to Geddy Lee, the quiet frontman of Rush, whose net worth exceeds $50 million. But few would guess that the man now surrounded by history and luxury was once a boy who lost his father at age 12, slept on cold wooden floors, and promised his mother that one day he would buy her an entire tomato sauce factory. He kept that promise, in his own way. Throughout his rise from poverty, Geddy Lee faced criticism, misunderstanding, and scars that might have ended his career. But what allowed him not only to overcome them, but to live as though he's safeguarding the soul of music and the memory of humanity in every item he owns? Could a boy who lost his father, living in a rundown house on the outskirts of Toronto, ever have dreamed that one day he'd be standing on stage before tens of thousands? And when his mother said, "Give up that useless rock music," what did he do? Perhaps that answer alone wrote the entire destiny of Geddy Lee. Geddy Lee, born Gary Lee Weinrib, was born in 1953 in North York, a poor suburb of Toronto. His parents were Jewish immigrants, Holocaust survivors. When Geddy was just 12, his father, Morris Weinrib, died from health complications stemming from his time in the Dachau concentration camp. It wasn't just a loss, it marked the beginning of hardship. His mother, Mary, became the sole provider, working tirelessly to raise 3 children. They lived in a dilapidated apartment, rotting wooden floors, damp-stained walls, and a creaking heater that rattled through the night. Geddy would lie on the cold floor, stare at the stained ceiling, and think about his father, about all that was left unfinished, and about the unfairness of it all. One day, he stumbled upon an old trumpet hidden under the bed, his father's, engraved with the name Morris W. Geddy clutched it like a treasure, and from that day on, music was no longer just a dream. It became a way to keep his father alive. While other kids were outside playing hockey, Geddy sat alone with a bass guitar on his lap, called a weirdo. He didn't argue. Music was the only place he felt he truly belonged. Instead of Superman lunchboxes and meat sandwiches, Geddy tucked away leftover sandwiches his mother hadn't managed to sell, to share with his younger brother. Instead of having his own room, he had a corner of the living room, where an old radio played jazz interwoven with news of war. From trumpet, he moved to clarinet, then drums, and finally bass, the instrument that would define his life. No teacher, no textbook, only bleeding fingers, sharp ears, and a belief that music was a way out. His mother once asked, "Do you really think you can buy dinner for the whole family with that guitar?" The question tore at him, but he didn't quit. When he chose to drop out of high school to pursue music full-time, relatives mocked him, and his mother was so upset she stopped speaking to him. Still, he pressed on. Geddy's first band played in grimy Toronto bars, where drunk patrons didn't bother clapping, where he once had to wash glasses to pay for stage time. But he wasn't discouraged. One night, in a snowstorm, he walked 5 kilometers with his bass to a gig, only to find the bar had closed. He didn't go home. He stood under the awning and plucked a few notes into the silence. That was the night he understood. Music might not bring money, but it was the only thing that would never betray him. What turned an unknown bass player from Toronto into someone spoken of with reverence around the world? And if you've ever seen Geddy Lee on stage with his silver hair and vintage bass in hand, it's hard to imagine there was a time he thought, "I'm not good enough to keep playing." Geddy Lee's earliest performances took place in dingy bars. No stage lights, no applause, only music blending with spilled beer and the blank stares of drunk patrons. But from those seemingly meaningless places, a legend was born, not by luck, but by persistence. In 1968, he joined Rush alongside Alex Lifeson. No one believed in them. One producer even declared, "This music is too complicated. No one's going to want to hear it." Instead of giving up, they recorded their first album on their own in 1974. Geddy had to sing, play bass, and manage keyboards all at once, simply because they couldn't afford to hire anyone else. That debut album sold just 3,500 copies, but with 2,112 in 1976, they broke through. A 20-minute epic with a theme of rebellion that forced critics to take notice. The record went platinum and catapulted Rush beyond Canada's borders. Behind that success were grueling years of non-stop touring, sleeping on buses, performing 300 nights a year. Geddy once recalled, "After one long tour, I opened the fridge, and all that was left was water and ketchup. I told my mom, 'One day, I'll buy you the whole ketchup factory.'" He kept that promise, in his own way. And then, the rewards started to arrive. In 1981, Moving Pictures was released, selling over 4 million copies in the US alone. The hit song Tom Sawyer captured the world's attention. The bass was no longer a background instrument. It became the soul of the track, and Geddy was the one who defined it. While bands like Kiss embraced the glitz of MTV, Rush stayed true to their identity. No gimmicks, just music. Geddy managed instruments, synths, and bass lines all at once. One commentator wrote, "Geddy Lee plays bass as if he's rewriting the laws of physics on stage." Even when his soaring vocals were once mocked as sounding like a cat wailing, he never changed. Because he knew that an artist survives through honesty. And that truth paid off. Rush earned 24 gold records, 14 platinum, and 3 multi-platinum albums, selling over 40 million records worldwide. Geddy was named an Officer of the Order of Canada in 1996 and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2013. While others took shortcuts with radio-friendly hits, Geddy chose the long road. Sustainable, refined. A journalist once called him the Leonard Cohen of progressive rock, quiet, but cutting straight to the bone. From a boy scavenging leftover bread, he rose to the stage of Madison Square Garden. From a crumbling home, he built a fortune worth over $50 million. From record sales, tours, royalties, and his signature instrument line. Geddy Lee never needed to be Mick Jagger, because he was his own genre, not chasing the spotlight, but letting it find him. And now, when we see the lavish mansion, the rare vintage basses, the 6-figure wine bottles, and the baseball memorabilia displayed like a museum, we understand that success didn't come from luck. It came from every night playing to an empty room. Every moment he almost gave up, and every time, he didn't. Some people measure wealth by how many houses they own. Others measure it by the depth of the memories they keep. Geddy Lee doesn't chase after luxury real estate or million-dollar watches. But every possession he owns, every joy he chooses, is its own quiet, meaningful, and unreplicable chapter. Unlike many of his rock star peers who collect mansions like tour stops, Geddy Lee has chosen just one place to live. Just one. But it's enough that the world seems to pause when he walks through the black iron gates of his home in Rosedale, Toronto's most quietly elegant and historic neighborhood. Built in 1857, His 12,000-square-foot mansion blends Georgian heritage with the quiet soul of an artist. Vaulted ceilings with intricate carvings, ebony African wood floors, hand-finished oak walls. The space plays like a silent symphony. Market value? Over $20 million. But no price tag can capture the feeling of standing in a place where every brick holds a story. A stark contrast to his childhood. Geddy once slept on cold wooden floors, his only company an old radio. Now, he wakes to sunlight streaming through windows that open onto a wildflower garden. The same kind his mother used to grow in foam boxes on the windowsill of their rundown apartment. Nothing in this house is excessive. Nothing is for show. Yet everything means something. I don't live here because it's expensive. I live here because it's quiet, and because it remembers where I came from. Step past the soaring living room, down a cool path paved with worn blue stone, and you reach Geddy Lee's garage, though it's not what you'd expect from a rock legend. No blindingly red supercars, no bulletproof SUVs, no roaring engines. Just 3 cars, each one a preserved memory, not just a machine. The first, a 1967 silver Volkswagen Beetle, untouched by restoration, still bearing a small scratch on the back door, from when Geddy accidentally scraped a suitcase against it in 1974 during Rush's first Montreal tour. It was his first mobile studio, where he scribbled down the bass line for Fly By Night while stuck between 2 trucks on Highway 401. A lucky fan once spotted him parked on the shoulder, humming into a notebook balanced on the steering wheel. The second, a 1971 Mercedes-Benz 280 SE, once dubbed the Bach of automobiles by European artists. Quiet, refined, unpretentious. Geddy bought it from a German conductor in Toronto, who once lectured him on the shared elegance of classical music and mechanical engineering. In the glove box, a handwritten Debussy score. Whose handwriting? No one knows. And Geddy's never said. But the true gem of the garage is a 1969 Porsche 911E, Irish green, manual transmission, once owned by an unknown British bassist. The man gifted it to Geddy as thanks after Geddy helped him rebuild his career. More than a car, it's a testimony to a personal philosophy. Help others quietly and keep the story to remind yourself. Classic car collectors estimate the Porsche alone could fetch $250,000 to $350,000. But to Geddy, its value isn't in the engine, it's in the life tied to it. I used to walk through snow just to play a gig with no pay. I still drive slow, only now I've got heated mirrors and a beautiful memory riding with me. Past the garage, a hallway leads to the basement, not of concrete and steel, but of oak, limestone, and the scent of time. If the garage is where memories roll, the wine cellar is where they age, quietly, slowly, deeply. No one expected the bassist who once skipped dinner to now own one of the largest private wine collections in Canada, tucked under a quiet mansion in Rosedale. Not one cellar, but 2, in a twin symmetry design. One side for storing, one for savoring. And between them, time, carefully distilled. Over 7,500 bottles hand-picked from the world's finest vineyards. Bordeaux, Napa, Tuscany, even obscure Loire Valley estates few know about. Many are worth $5,000 to $15,000 apiece, including a Chateau Latour, 1961, opened with Alex Lifeson on the final night of the Clockwork Angels tour. A silent farewell to their golden era. But the worth of these bottles isn't in the labels. As Geddy once said, good wine isn't to impress, it's to remind you you're alive. One of his most treasured bottles wasn't from France or Italy, but from a Lebanese-American vineyard owner in California, who told him how she lost her entire crop to wildfires. Geddy bought 200 bottles, not to hoard, but to give to artist friends, planting seeds for new memories. Once, he kept a bottle sealed for 17 years, not because it was rare, but because it was the last wine he shared with his father. When he finally opened it, he stood alone in the cellar, no overhead lights. Just a single candle, a thin crystal glass, and Brahms' Symphony No. 1. 3 playing softly. I once didn't dare ask my mom for a soda. Now I keep time in glass, not to drink, but to remember how thirsty I once was. If wine preserves memory by taste, then baseball preserves history through reverence. Walk out of the cellar, past a half-open dark oak door, and you'll find a room few journalists have ever entered. Not because Geddy hides it, but because he considers it sacred. Inside, over 300 autographed baseballs rest in UV-protected glass cases. Not just from legends like Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, or Joe DiMaggio, but also from forgotten names of the Negro Leagues, where black players were exiled during segregation. He also owns an original 1923 World Series ticket, a game-used Lou Gehrig bat, and a brown leather glove from a Satchel Paige game, all deemed priceless in collector circles. Not for the dollar signs, though the total collection may exceed $1 million, but for what they represent. Geddy doesn't flex his finds on Instagram. He doesn't auction them for PR. Only in 2023 did he release a small selection at Christie's, donating the proceeds to youth sports programs for immigrant children in the U.S. I don't collect to own. I keep things so their stories don't disappear. While others invest in memorabilia for profit, Geddy treats baseball like a secular faith. As a child, he couldn't afford a glove, so he folded newspaper and tied it with rubber bands to play with friends. What he preserves now isn't to erase poverty, but to protect a generation's collective memory. Not every legacy is written in music. Some are inked in fading signatures on a baseball. Climb to the top floor of his home, and you won't find a gym, home theater, or hot tub. Just warm light, oak-paneled walls, and the scent of old paper. What Geddy calls his quiet room. Here, he keeps over 700 books, not bestsellers or rock memoirs, but philosophy, history, psychology, and classical music. He's drawn to Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl, Elie Wiesel, writers of pain, memory, and the human journey back from loss. On his desk, a brass fountain pen and a notebook filled with thoughts no one has read. When asked why he hasn't written a memoir, Geddy simply smiled. I don't write to retell. I write to understand. One of his favorite rituals is listening to vintage vinyl. He still plays a 1970s Garrard turntable, untouched, unmodernized. Each night, as the house quiets down, he selects a Beethoven sonata or a rare Coltrane session, pours a glass of aged Burgundy, and just listens. No phone, no interruptions. In that moment, he's not a rock icon, just a man trying to hear his own soul. I've spent my life being listened to. Now I live to listen to myself. When Geddy was younger, some called him weird for sitting alone with a bass guitar instead of playing hockey. But it's that very weirdness that led him somewhere different. Not to the peak of fame, but to a quiet depth very few successful people ever reach. Geddy Lee doesn't own estates across Europe. He doesn't fly private. He doesn't need an entourage to carry his designer bags. But he owns something rarer: the ability to remember, to live honestly, and to turn every possession, even just one, into a legacy. Compared to artists who thrive in the spotlight, Geddy thrives in the space behind the curtain, where there's no applause, just the strength to stay true in a noisy world. Some people become rich by dreaming big. Geddy Lee became unforgettable by living deep. People often assume that a legend like Geddy Lee must be flawless, but it's the small scratches, the criticism, the misunderstandings, the silences that make his image more human, more real, and more relatable to us. In the 1970s, as Rush began to emerge, Geddy Lee's piercing, high-pitched, metallic voice became an easy target for ridicule among studios and critics. One article even described it as a screaming, static-filled radio in a tin shed. Rolling Stone in 1976 rated Rush poorly, largely because of what they called an unpleasant vocal tone. At a time when audiences favored the warm baritones of Jim Morrison or Bob Seger, Geddy's voice seemed to come from another planet. People used to say, "Rush makes great music. Too bad the singer's hard to listen to." Compared to Robert Plant, who also sang high but was hailed as the rock and roll god, Geddy was an outsider, but instead of changing, he chose patience. Over the years, that difficult voice became his signature. No one else could sing Tom Sawyer like he did, and few had the courage to keep their voice unchanged for nearly 5 decades. I know I'm not everyone's favorite singer, but I sing with my own voice, and to me, that's worth more than any standing ovation. After Neil Peart's personal tragedy in the late 1990s, Rush disappeared completely from the public eye. No concerts, no releases, no interviews, and not a single official statement from the band. For almost 5 years. In an era where every artist used hiatuses to drop solo albums, appear in films, or publish memoirs, Geddy Lee simply vanished alongside his friend. Many fans were angry. Forums fumed. Some writers accused Geddy of being lazy, withdrawn, neglecting Rush's musical legacy. Later, when asked why he didn't go solo, he answered gently, "When you see a friend hurting so much, they don't even recognize themselves. Making music isn't the first thing on your mind." During that time, Geddy frequently visited Neil, not to talk shop, but to walk, to read, or just sit in silence. Not a single song was written during that stretch, and yet, perhaps it was the most profound chapter of their artistic friendship. When Vapor Trails was finally released in 2002, a fan wrote, "I'm no longer listening to Rush's music. I'm hearing the voice of someone who has truly lived, hurt, and still moved forward." In 2023, Geddy decided to auction off a small part of his personal baseball collection at Christie's. It stirred mild controversy. Tabloids ran headlines like, "Rock star makes millions off baseballs?" as if he were profiting from America's heritage. One fan tweeted, "Geddy Lee selling legacy for money? That's not the man I thought I knew." He didn't rebut, didn't post a clarifying video. He just wrote a short message on his personal page. "I've preserved these baseballs as I've preserved memories of my own. And now I want to pass them on to those who cherish them as I did. The proceeds will help kids dream, like I once did, with nothing but a paper glove." All profits went to educational and community sports programs, and a portion to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, an institution dedicated to preserving the history of African American baseball. After the auction, the museum hung a small plaque bearing his name, with the inscription, "A man not born into baseball, but who loved it as a part of himself." No one lives in the spotlight without being scrutinized, and Geddy Lee, despite no tabloid scandals, no violent outbursts, no battles with addiction, has his share of scars. A stray criticism about his voice, a long silence misunderstood, a decision questioned by people who didn't know the whole story. But what sets Geddy apart is how he walks through the dark, not dodging, not defending, just quietly enduring, letting time do the rest. He doesn't need to win every argument, because he's already won the one that matters most, staying true to himself in a world constantly demanding that you be someone else. I never dreamed of being loved by everyone. I only hoped that when people spoke of me, they'd say, "That was someone who never pretended." Some people leave a legacy through music, others through statues, street names, or medals. And then there are those, like Geddy Lee, who choose to leave an impact through things no one ever sees, quietly, steadily, and with a depth that can't be measured. In 2011, not many noticed that one of the most prestigious scholarships at Niagara College, specializing in winemaking, was named the Geddy Lee Scholarship. A rocker, choosing to invest in viticulture and enology. For Geddy, this wasn't for show. He understood that behind every good bottle of wine was a lifetime of silent, meticulous labor. To him, education is like winemaking, requiring patience, and someone who believes in the seed even before it sprouts. To date, this scholarship has helped over 30 students from low-income families pursue careers in wine, a craft that is at once ancient and modern, blending science and emotion. Much like music, I used to have no idea how I'd make a living. If someone had helped me believe in myself back then, maybe things would have been easier. Now I want to do that for someone else. When Neil Peart, his best friend, bandmate, and soulmate in music, passed away from brain cancer in 2020, Geddy didn't go on television to speak. He stayed silent and got to work. Together with Alex Lifeson, he donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to brain tumor research foundations, including the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada. No galas, no press releases, just quiet transfers, often with handwritten notes to families, notes that hospitals later confirmed helped save lives because the money arrived just in time. No one asked him to do this, but perhaps Geddy understood. Music can't cure cancer, but the human heart can help ease the pain of loss. I can't bring my friend back, but if I can help someone else not lose theirs, I'll do it. I don't need my name on a billboard. For years, Geddy Lee has been a major supporter of Grapes for Humanity, a charity that raises funds through wine to support disaster victims and education in developing countries. He doesn't just give money. He's auctioned off some of his most prized bottles, even those he's held onto for more than 15 years. In 2023, he also donated part of his rare baseball collection to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City. At the donation ceremony, he simply said, "I'm Jewish, born in Canada, but I know what it feels like to be forgotten, and I don't want that to keep happening." His reverence for histories that are not his own is proof that a person of culture is one who knows how to pause and listen to someone else's pain. Geddy Lee has never called for crowds to donate. He doesn't stand on stages with giant checks. Yet in 2021, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from Artists for Peace and Justice for his quiet yet enduring contributions. When accepting the award, he didn't step onto a podium. He sent a short video message. "I don't think I deserve the word legend. I just believe if you live long enough and stay kind enough, you might leave something behind. Not for the headlines, but for the hearts." Geddy Lee didn't invent a new genre. He didn't open a music school. He didn't start a foundation bearing his name. But the legacy he leaves behind is a feeling that you can succeed without stepping on anyone. That you can be quiet and still be meaningful. That you can be a good person without needing to be known as one. In an age where everyone rushes toward fame, he chose to stay in the deep end, where acts of kindness aren't broadcast, but are etched into the lives they touch. Not every legend has a statue. Some, like Geddy leave behind a song, a handshake, a belief, and an entire generation will remember that.